I want to talk about ethical leadership theory. Now, when we talk about ethical leadership, the idea here is, of course, that leaders should be ethical. And I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. And ethical leadership theory really came out in the wake of situations like Enron and WorldCom and other, the SNL loan crisis, and other events in the 1980s and early 1990s that really suggested that our leadership was in a ethical crisis. And so researchers came up with the idea of ethical leadership theory and the importance of being an ethical leader. Now, it's very simple to say, oh, we should be an ethical leader. And leaders should be ethical. That seems pretty straightforward. Have integrity, be a person of character. And we understand that, especially at the Naval Academy, about being a person of character. But ethical leadership theory suggests that there's a little more to it than just setting the example and just being of good character yourself. So the definition of ethical leadership theory is this: the demonstration of normatively appropriate conduct through personal actions and interpersonal relationships, and the promotion of such conduct to followers through two-way communication, reinforcement, and decision-making. That "and" is very important. There's really two sides to ethical leadership. It's being a person of character, and in fact, demonstrating that you are a person of character in your everyday actions, and promoting that conduct in others. We refer to these as being both a moral person and a moral manager. The moral person side is about setting the example. It's about being a role model and setting an example of personal behavior. And doing it authentically, being an actually attractive and credible role model, so that when you do talk about ethics, that people respond to that and see you as an ethical person. If you start to get upset when people are unethical and you attempt to promote ethical behavior, and yet you yourself are not setting the example on ethical behavior, you are not going to be a credible role model. And this becomes even more important as you are closer to the followers and helping them to understand what it means to be an ethical person, because they are going to look to you for that example. This means being moral in our interpersonal behaviors, how we treat people, being basically fair, and taking ethical actions and having expectations of yourself for meeting ethical standards. However, setting the example and being a moral person is not enough. As a leader, you also have to be a moral manager. This means having formal ethics policies and procedures. It means making sure that your organization has a core ethical ideology, a core ethical values. It means the organization itself acting with integrity. It means building structural reinforcement. So in other words, not only having ethics policies, but enforcing them and insisting that people act ethically. To focus on processes and make sure those processes treat people fairly. Being a moral person is not enough. Being a moral manager is not enough. It actually takes both of these things. It's not enough to just set the example and then expect people to just behave ethically. It's also not enough to expect people to behave ethically and to insist on it and demand it, and then not to be an ethical person yourself. You have to be both a moral person and a moral manager. You have to set the example and you have to communicate your expectations in terms of the entire team behaving ethically and having integrity and being people of character. So with those two ideas in mind, there has been research around ethical leadership. And so we can do is we can ask followers about leaders' ethical behaviors, both at demonstrating their own moral standing and being a moral person, and also demonstrating ethical leadership and the promotion of ethical conduct in their followers. So if we look at this chart, what we see is some influences on being an ethical leader. These are the individual characteristics the leader is. We tend to find that leaders who are higher in agreeableness, higher in conscientiousness, higher in moral reasoning, and that believe that they have control over their own actions tend to be more likely to be ethical leaders. Leaders who are low in neuroticism and are low in Machiavellianism, or the need to manipulate and control others, usually to their own harm, also tend to be higher in their ethical leadership. At the same time, there are also situational influences. When leaders see other leaders role modeling ethicality, whether it's their senior leaders or their peers, they are more likely to be ethical leaders themselves. When the context of the organization is more ethical, they are more likely to be ethical themselves and to exhibit ethical leadership. And again, when we talk about ethical leadership, it is setting the example and it is promoting ethical conduct in the organization. Some of the outcomes of ethical leadership. We find that ethical leaders tend to have followers who are more likely to make ethical decisions themselves. We find more pro-social behavior among followers. We find less counterproductive work behaviors. And these are counterproductive behaviors such as stealing from the workplace, not helping other people. And we also see higher levels of follower satisfaction, follower motivation, and follower commitment to the organization and to the leader. So being an ethical leader, setting the example, and also promoting ethical behavior in others explicitly leads to better outcomes for the leader, better outcomes for the organization.